Well, Mr. Cat, the producer's arrived, so we're ready. Well, obviously without the producer. And now we've got a producer's assistant, Prince, is turning up too, but that's a different story. Today we're not going to talk about actuality and reality. We're going to talk about a subject you may not have thought about. But there is a slow transformation occurring with humanity. And ultimately you've got to understand that humanity is basically our DNA double helix. And that all races and genders and sexual orientations share this DNA double helix. But what we are seeing is a transformation of human beings into digital devices. You like that? It's a subject you're going to hear more about over the next decade or two. The transformation of humanity into digital devices, and we see it around us growing in influence. I'm not talking about artificial intelligence. I mean, obviously there are issues regarding artificial intelligence. I know there's research currently going on among some sovereign nation state to create small bomblets about the size of a golf ball, which are designed are attracted to penetrate human beings if they've got a certain testosterone level. So instead of the brutality we see in the Ukraine, where towns and cities have been flattened, modern warfare could be based on the idea of actually eradicating human beings or protecting property, just walking into that property. And obviously it's research going into that, and that's all about artificial intelligence. And I'm not talking about digital recognition or digital identity. Now obviously a lot of people are concerned about digital identity, and unfortunately in the 21st century almost every aspect of your life has been incorporated into some corporate dream or into some state archive. And with the proliferation of CCTV cameras around the globe, facial recognition technology, I mean, this struggle about a digital identity, it's an important struggle, but it's a struggle that's been lost. But I'm talking about something more insidious, something that is happening around us, something we are not aware of, as we've been pushed and pushed and pushed into a corner as far as digital innovation is concerned. Now, human beings, when they came out of Africa, Cro-Magnon, our particular subspecies, there are about 9 different species of humans, and we eradicated the other 8 and their sub-variants. But human beings have a common DNA, and what made us so powerful was not our ability to invent weapons, but our ability to cooperate, our ability to share a common vision, our ability to have a common dream, our ability to act as one when our opponents and nature didn't act as one. That was our strength. Whether we use Stone Age tools or whether we use nuclear technology, our strength is not competition, our strength is cooperation. And as human beings we cooperate. Now as we've evolved, we've tended to develop certain senses. Visual, hearing, speech, and the list goes on and on. We develop these senses in order to survive as a species. And these senses have been fundamental to our survival as a species. And the fact that we now, like a plague of locusts, have overwhelmed or are overwhelming the natural environment, and we're beginning to suffer the consequences of that private investment for private profit mentality. But let's put this in a way that most of us can understand. You walk into a supermarket. As you walk into a supermarket, and these days you walk into a bank. Now, human interaction is an expensive commodity in a private investment for private profit society, in a capitalist society. It's a very expensive commodity. So if we can train people to be digital devices, or corporations and businesses, and governments and government departments, if we can eradicate that human element, that human interaction, which is so fundamental for us as a species, we can exponentially increase profits. So let's go back to our supermarket analogy. You walk into a supermarket. You pick what you want. You want to leave. Some human beings in our society, because where they're so isolated and so privatised, their only interaction is that human interaction with the person at the other side of the till, or the other side of the cash register, or the other side of the digital device. But now, through engineering, what you describe as social engineering, where you cut down the number of workers at checkouts, you force people to do their own checking out. You ring a government department, you go to Centrelink, no human interaction, you direct it to a computer, and if you can't use a computer, bad luck. You go into a bank, and I had an interesting experience today. I walked into a major bank to do some banking, and the person in front of me had cash, and they were directed to an automatic teller machine to do their business, because that particular bank doesn't take cash anymore over the counter. You interact with the tax department, and they're very reluctant to take cheques. Very reluctant. And the list goes on and on. So we are slowly being managed, pushed into a direction where automation, not just in production, but automation in service industries, becomes paramount in terms of increasing profitability. So it's that human interaction which is disappearing. Now, what's happening to us as older people is nothing compared to what is happening to younger people and younger generations, and generations that are not yet born. Because their interaction with the world is not standing here and listening to the birds while I'm speaking to you. If you get bored, you can listen to the birds. And you look at the trees and the grass. Their interaction with the world is through a screen. And that screen removes the necessity for human interaction with parents, siblings, people at preschool, school, as more and more learning is directed into digital platforms. Not just financial transactions, not just transactions in a supermarket, not just transactions in a financial sense, but transactions in terms of learning and interacting with other people and your environment. And there is a cost, a huge cost, not just for individuals, but society as a whole. and that we are seeing that cost today. In an era when we have unlimited ability to access facts and figures, we are being buried in a tsunami of belief and alternative facts. When there is no human interaction, or minimal human interaction, that is when you see the growth of separatism. A separatism based on you not understanding or knowing somebody else or walking in their shoes, and your only experience of them and their community is through a silo of information which excludes all other opinions. So in an era when we should have interaction and mass communication and facts at our fingertips, we see the growth of political, social, cultural movements which have nothing to do, facts or figures or reality. And this disease, and it is a disease, it's a social disease, is beginning to poison the body politic. To such a degree, the focus of struggle has changed, especially in Western societies, especially in societies which define themselves as so-called liberal democracies or parliamentary democracies. The focus has changed. The focus is totally on the individual, and the individual being solely responsible for the problems which are created through the transformation of humanity into digital devices. 20% of young women in Australia currently, between 13 and 20, are clinically depressed. A similar number, a little bit lower, of young men between 13 and 20 are clinically depressed. I'm not talking about sad, but clinically depressed. And to a significant degree, this issue is, this transformation is real, and it's happening now. And when you tie in this transformation with the economic situation we find ourselves in, where the individual has to do the heavy lifting to ensure corporations continue to gain profitability or their shareholders will desert them, we find a double burden on a younger generation. And then when you add the climate emergency to that double burden, you can understand why there is such little faith in parliamentary democracy. But the problem is the fact that people are living in their own virtual world, living in their own silos, communicating only with those within that silo, within that network. The problem is human interaction suffers. It declines, and ultimately it disappears. And when it disappears, any attempt to create change, to break down hierarchy, to hold wealth in common, also disappears, because we become little more than digital devices responding like Pavlov's dog to certain prodding in a particular direction. So it is a very serious situation, and to a significant degree it highlights the lack of understanding about the situation we find ourselves in as human beings. As we're pushed and we're prodded into accepting a digital solution to human problems. Communication is the very essence of humanity. It is the very essence of understanding the other. 3% of the Australian population identifies as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. 3%. With this debate about the voice, the referendum on the voice to Parliament, a particularly minor constitutional alteration. It's not going to make much radical change, apart from the fact that it'll allow an Indigenous voice to be heard by the Executive and by Parliament. Because so few people have any interaction with Indigenous Australians, we see misinformation, disinformation build and overwhelm the process itself. Ultimately, most people believe that their failure is their personal failure. Maybe it's their upbringing, maybe it's their education, maybe it's their DNA profile, maybe it's their psychological status. But the fact is that we are part of a greater expanse, a greater environment, a greater universe than ourselves. We are moulded, our DNA changes over time to deal with the real experiences, not the virtual experiences which we immerse ourselves in today. George Orwell said, telling the truth in a time of universal deceit is a revolutionary act. Well, things have changed. Telling the truth is no longer the essence of change. The essence of change is to prevent humanity being moulded into a digital device by forces within society which are bent on creating ever-increasing profits, irrespective, as I said, of the human, social, environmental costs. And if that means transforming humanity into a digital device, if it means creating a brave new world in the 21st century to keep profits flowing, to keep shareholders happy, then this digital transformation, this transformation of humanity into a digital entity will continue ad nauseum. But you do have the ability to rebel. You have the ability to say no. You have the ability not to be treated as a customer by a government department. You have the ability not to use an automatic teller. You have the ability to ask for a face-to-face meeting. Not a meeting on Zoom. You have that ability because it's that face-to-face interaction which teaches us about the people around us and the problems they face. Without that, we are nothing. And to allow our children and the next generation to be consumed by a virtual world while ignoring reality is like selling them the last ticket on the last train to hell.